I purchased Yu-Gi-Oh cards from Blockbuster, a company that has been out of business for 10 years. Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome to the Parkside Merchant channel. If you're new to our channel, we cover a lot of vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! And collectible related topics. If this sort of stuff interests you and if you enjoy this sort of content, feel free to drop a like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on all of our very original and very interesting content about the vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! And vintage collectibles markets. So for today's video, I wanted to speak a little bit about a personal topic, which is, for me, where I purchased the majority of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Collectible inventory when I was a kid. And in my particular case, the place that I used to shop at the most was Blockbuster, believe it or not. And for many of you, you're probably surprised to hear this, because I think a lot of kids purchased their Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards from either toy stores or from supermarkets or super centers like a Walmart or maybe a Target. A lot of folks had local card stores in their neighborhoods that they purchased things from, or they bought their cards online. In my particular case, right, I didn't get to do a lot of online shopping as a kid, right? I grew up in a pretty suburban, somewhat rural part of the United States where there was no local card stores. I didn't get to go to like the toy stores a ton. There wasn't like a card store or anything like that in our neighborhood or nearby. There weren't really any good stores within walking distance of where I lived. Every place that I wanted to shop as a kid, I'd have to be driven there by my parents. And obviously, for anyone who's a parent, you know that you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on how much your kids are spending or how much they're, going after toys and things like that. So the toy store trips, right, or getting to have kind of spending sprees, if you will, on these sort of things were pretty limited as a kid. And what was unique about Blockbuster, in my case, is it was always a regular destination. It was a place that we got to go to all the time. It's hard for people that don't remember Blockbuster very well, but basically that was a very cool place to shop at and a place to go in the early 2000s. You go back to 2003, 2004, Blockbuster was like on fire. And it seems comical, I think, in hindsight, that people would think of it this way, but it was a very fun place to go, especially as a kid, because they had everything, right? They had film, so if you were interested in seeing the latest releases, the latest movies, you could do that. If you were interested in television series, right, they had all sorts of good content that you could rent there as well. Video games, right? I was a big video gamer as a kid, and I didn't always have the money to afford to buy the latest releases or the coolest PlayStation games or whatever. You could rent video games from Blockbuster for a pretty reasonable price and then return them. So I was always very interested in doing that as well. So Blockbuster was like one of the coolest possible places. I have some of my fondest memories as a kid, just like walking the halls of Blockbuster and discovering all sorts of cool inventory and cool videos and video games and all sorts of stuff. So what made the Blockbuster experience, I think, even more interesting to me as a kid is that they also had the promotional Yu-Gi-Oh products. And so when you got to the checkout lane, they had all these nice setups of like the packs that you could get. They often had the tins available as well. And so I would guess the majority of the Yu-Gi-Oh products that I owned as a kid were things that I purchased from Blockbuster because it was very easy, right? It was a good add-on as a kid when your parents were taking you there. You get the video games. Real easy to just tack on a pack here or a pack there instead of getting your parents to do a dedicated trip to a card store or a toy store or whatever, right? Which would be the places that you may more conventionally have purchased Yu-Gi-Oh cards as a kid. So I talked a bit about why I purchased my Yu-Gi-Oh cards from Blockbuster. It was a lot of fun, right? It was a regular destination for us as kids. It was really easy to get an add-on Yu-Gi-Oh purchase to whatever rentals were already in the shopping cart at Blockbuster. And it was cool. They had a lot of the good stuff. They had the tins, they had the most recent packs. I believe that they had a lot of good relationships with Konami and Upper Deck and everybody back in the day. So there was all sorts of really good inventory that they had access to. And it was really easy for me to get my hands on it relative to having to buy it online or go to a Walmart or a Target or a card store in my particular neighborhood under my particular circumstances. I think I also just wanted to talk a little bit about why this matters to me. If you're a collector, right, part of the fun of collecting is the nostalgia that goes along with, if you have cards, right, it's all stuff that you can remember from your childhood, brings back all sorts of fun memories. And for me, as unusual as it may be, there is a very close relationship in my memory of Yu-Gi-Oh and Blockbuster. They kind of go hand in hand. I remember immediately when I would walk out of those stores, I'd rip open those packs and start looking at what I pulled from the Blockbuster purchases. So it just brings back a lot of fun memories. Blockbuster obviously has been gone for a long time, and so have a lot of those vintage Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but it's all to me very much in the same pockets of my memory, if you will, when I think back onto some of those early days in the Yu-Gi-Oh market. So I've given you kind of a fun little exposition about my personal history as a collector and some of my thoughts about Blockbuster and why it was a fun place to shop as a kid. I wanted to close this video with some topics that I think might be a little controversial or debatable or whatever, but I think this notion of Blockbuster carries a little bit more meaning than just the nostalgia and the fun element of what it meant for my collector's experience. So here's what I mean. Here's why I think the Blockbuster story matters to you as a collector or investor in vintage Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So it goes without saying that Blockbuster has been gone for a long time. They declared bankruptcy, I think, in 2010 after they faced major headwinds and major competition from emerging market competitors, companies like Netflix and Redbox. In the case of Netflix, they were doing mail order DVD deliveries, and then around the 2010 timeframe, they started making forays into the streaming business or video on demand. In the case of Redbox, they were using what you probably remember, the kiosk style delivery where you'd go to the supermarket and then you could pick up your DVDs from the kiosk machine there at the supermarket. So very heavy competition from two emerging business models that they faced. And Blockbuster, being sort of the king of the market for video rental service, was very slow in its response to some of these competitive threats, and was in fact quite ignorant or quite just arrogant, in my opinion, or quite unresponsive to emerging competition and the shifting winds of consumer demand, which were moving more toward the mail order delivery and the streaming service delivery models. And so the reason I think this matters for collectors is you don't want to be the Blockbuster of the Yu-Gi-Oh market. You don't want to be the person that has the biggest inventory, the biggest registry sets, the most raw cards, and get blindsided by some kind of a market trend or an emerging competitor. And so one of the things that I recommend to all folks who are collectors or investors in the Yu-Gi-Oh market is that you pay attention to the market, that you listen to commentators, that you do your research, that you stay on top of market trends, so that you don't become subject to some kind of a threat or unforeseen event that causes an issue for your portfolio. And these could be any number of different problems. It could be emerging counterfeit issues. It could be problems with PSA and Beckett. It could be changes in their business models if they start to automate the grading processes. There's all kinds of things that you need to keep an eye out for in this market in order to make sure that you are remaining responsible and that you're staying on top of the trends and not getting blindsided by some kind of a major issue or development in the market. So that's all. I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane about Blockbuster. Please let me know in the comments, where did you buy your Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Did anyone else have the same kind of experience at Blockbuster that I had? What are your thoughts about what Blockbuster can teach us in the collectibles market or just in business in general? Be very interested to hear people's reactions, comments, and thoughts about today's video. Once again, please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. So thanks again, folks. That's all for this video. The Parkside Merchant. We'll see you next time.